What if I told you this is one of the most dangerous battles that happened in World War II? The forest was alive with death. Imagine trudging down a narrow, mud-choked road, the air thick with smoke and the smell of pine shattered by artillery blasts. The trees, once tall and green, now stood topless and broken, their jagged edges clawing at the gray December sky. Jeeps crept past, overstuffed with the wounded men, slumped against radiators, stretchers laid across seats, brown blankets pulled tight over chins. Bandages, soaked and white, were the only color left in that wasteland. To soldiers who survived, it felt less like Europe and more like some cruel vision from a nightmare. This was the Hürtgen Forest, 50 square miles of misery on the German border. Divisions had bled here for months, clawing only a few miles at the cost of thousands of lives. Hemingway called it Passchendaele with trees. Others simply called it hell. But within this living nightmare stood a hill, 400 meters high, crowned with bunkers and machine guns. From its slopes, German eyes could see everything, every American movement, every tank, every man. It was the key, and without it, the advance could not continue. Many had tried to take it, armored units, entire divisions, all had failed. But now, the task fell to just 200 men, battle-hardened Rangers, veterans of Omaha Beach and Pointe du Hoc. They would charge this hill head-on, knowing full well they might not come back down. This is the story of Hill 400, the Battle of Hürtgen Forest. The Hürtgen campaign began in September, year 1944. By then, Allied forces had swept across France, liberated Paris, and pushed into Germany itself. But the path to the Rhine was blocked by this forest, a maze of ridges, ravines, and evergreens, so dense even daylight struggled to break through. The First Army was ordered to clear it. Why? To protect the right flank and to silence German artillery, hidden in its depths. But the forest was no ordinary battlefield. The ground was sown with mines. Barbed wire stretched unseen under fallen leaves. Pillboxes, camouflaged and reinforced, spat death across interlocking fields of fire. It was, as one soldier later said, a death trap designed by nature, perfected by the Germans. Division after division was thrown in. The 9th Infantry Division fought for a month and gained just 3 kilometers at the cost of 4,500 casualties. The 28th Infantry Division lost more than 6,000 men. Then the 4th Division went in, only to be torn apart. By December, the forest was littered with the wreckage of 3 shattered divisions. One historian called it the Argonne of World War II. And still, Hill 400 loomed untouched. Into this nightmare marched the US 2nd Ranger Battalion. These men had already earned their reputation on D-Day, scaling the cliffs of Pointe du Hoc under fire, storming bunkers with grenades and knives. They were volunteers, hand-picked, trained for daring raids. But in Hürtgen, there would be no raids. Instead, they were ordered to replace broken infantry on the front line. Lieutenant Bob Edlin remembered arriving at Garremeter village and watching shattered soldiers retreat. The infantry outfit that had been up there was actually almost running in retreat just to get away. The Rangers went anyway. Artillery greeted them, smashing the earth around their foxholes. It was the purest hell I've ever been through, Edlin said. Round after round, beating on your head until you thought you couldn't stand it. Worse still, the Rangers discovered abandoned gear, discarded weapons, even wounded Americans left behind by retreating troops. Medics from the Rangers evacuated them. To the battle-hardened men, it was unthinkable. They dug in, reinforced positions, and endured the cold. Eisenhower himself visited, shocked that the frontline troops lacked winter gear while staff officers in the rear were warm and dry. Within days, the Rangers received boots, coats, and even wristwatches. It was a rare moment of relief. But relief would not last. Orders soon came down. The Rangers were going to take Hill 400. The plan was simple on paper, suicidal in practice. Companies D and F would storm Hill 400 directly. Companies A, B, and C would block reinforcements. Company E would hold in reserve. Lieutenant Len Lamel scouted the hill at night, creeping close enough to glimpse bunkers and machine gun nests. He returned before dawn, cold and shaken, but with valuable intel. At 7:30 a.m. on the 7th of December, the assault would begin. At first light, artillery thundered, the Rangers moved. 65 men surged across a frozen field, rifles blazing, yelling as loud as they could, a raw, primal cry meant to shake even veteran Germans. Bullets cut them down, mortars exploded among them, but still they ran, bayonets fixed, charging uphill on icy shale. Staff Sergeant Bill Elrod Petty recalled the moment. "We were stuck between our own barrage and enemy mortars. Then one man shouted, 'Let's go get the bastards!' And suddenly, as one, the Rangers charged, bayonets shining, hip firing, yelling a battle cry that must have gone back to the eons of time. I never saw a more glorious sight. By 8:35 a.m., against all odds, the summit was theirs. Hill 400, captured by just 200 Rangers. But the fight was far from over. The Germans were not about to surrender their prized hill. Field Marshal Walter Model, furious, ordered its immediate recapture. He promised Iron Crosses and 2-week furloughs to any paratroopers who seized it back. What followed was 2 days of unrelenting counterattacks. The first came at 9:30 a.m., 150 German Fallschirmjägers charging uphill under the cover of artillery. Hand-to-hand combat broke out among bunkers. Bayonets clashed, grenades burst, and men grappled in the mud. Somehow, the Rangers held. By noon, only 32 Rangers were left standing on the hill. Companies had been cut into fragments. But when the second wave came in mid-afternoon, they fought again. Outnumbered 10-1, exhausted and bleeding, the Rangers clung to their positions. Lieutenant Lamel remembered, "My platoon sergeant, Ed Secor, out of ammo and unarmed, grabbed 2 German pistols from the wounded and charged a patrol by himself. His men rallied, and they drove the Germans back. One man's courage had turned the tide. By late afternoon, the hilltop was down to just 25 Rangers. German forces regrouped for a third assault, coming from 3 sides at once. The outcome seemed inevitable. But atop the hill was Lieutenant Howard Kettlehut, a forward artillery observer. With a clear 360-degree view, he called in every available gun in the Corps' 18 battalions. A storm of shells rained around the hill, encircling it in a ring of fire. German waves were shredded before they could close in. Night fell. Wounded Rangers were carried down in agony, medics stumbling over rocks and snow. Captain Walter Block, the battalion doctor, was killed, tending his men when a shell struck the aid station. Still, the Rangers held. Through the drizzle and shell fire, they endured. On the 8th of December, the 4th and 5th counterattacks came. Artillery pounded, German paratroopers charged, even slipping through foxholes in the dark. But grenades and BAR fire threw them back. After 40 hours of combat, Hill 400 was still American. When relief finally arrived, the 2nd Ranger Battalion was shattered. Out of 200 men, 107 were wounded, 19 killed, and 4 missing. Entire companies had been reduced to a handful of survivors. Yet, they had achieved the impossible. No division, no armored command had managed it, but a few hundred Rangers did. Captain Sid Salomon summed it up. 3,000 men with tanks couldn't take the Bergeberg. 3 companies of Rangers captured and held it. 9 days later, the hill was lost again, only to be retaken months later. Strategically, Hill 400 may not have changed the war, but symbolically, it proved something greater, that courage, unity, and sheer determination could defy even the most impossible odds. The Hürtgen Forest was a graveyard, but in its shadow, on a cold December morning, the Rangers carved a legend that endures to this day. The Battle of Hürtgen Forest stands today as one of the most haunting chapters of World War II, a campaign that swallowed divisions whole, where nature itself seemed an enemy. Yet within that crucible, the 2nd Ranger Battalion carved their place in history. Against impossible odds, they stormed Hill 400 and held it, not for glory, but because the mission demanded it. Their victory did not end the war, nor did it erase the suffering that Forest claimed. But it proved something timeless, that in the bleakest moments, when the world seems lost to darkness, courage and sacrifice can still burn bright. The Hürtgen Forest was hell, but on that hill, the Rangers showed the world what it means to defy the impossible and leave behind a legend that will never die.